Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the great pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. After 3 weeks, Matt, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you. I'm doing much better now that we're together here again at Horse Center.
The Horse Center band is back together, and we're talking Breeders' Cup, Matt. We have less than 4 weeks to go to the big 2 days at Del Mar. We're going to do our contenders and our pretenders lists for this year. We're going to run down most of the races and talk horses that we think really have a big shot to win, and some that might surprise you. Matt and I don't like too much, but let's get ready to rumble, Matt, with this list. You want to start classic?
Let's go classic.
Let's do classic. I'm just gonna throw names out, and you tell me what you think. Arrogate.
Contender. Not excited about, but contender.
He's a contender for me, 1.25 miles. If he improves just a little bit more from race to race at Del Mar, I think he's got a big shot. He is a contender for me as well. Gun Runner?
Contender, although there's certainly questions about the distance.
1.25 miles is a distance he hasn't won at yet. Of course, he's looked everything, including fantastic in these 1.125 wins he's been doing at Churchill Downs and Saratoga. Plus, he's got the Baffert quartet to worry about, but very much a contender for me. All right, let's start talking about other Bafferts besides Arrogate. What about Collected?
I'm making him a contender. We know he likes Del Mar, so he's a contender.
For me, I'm going to say Pretender. I don't see Collected beating Arrogate, Gun Runner, West Coast, and then some closers in here. If Collected is better than third, I would be a little bit surprised. A very nice horse, had things his way in the Pacific Classic. This time, I don't like him. Pretender. Our first disagreement, Matt, I like it. More Baffert, West Coast.
Pretender. He's been beating up on this 3-year-old bunch that has not been distinguished. And like you said, I don't see him beating all three of the ones that we just mentioned.
The up-and-coming horse, Matt, lest we forget 2016. He's not accomplished what Arrogate has, of course, to this point, but West Coast is zooming up the charts. I like him better than Collected. I think he's in with a shot, at least. He's a contender for me. All right, 2 disagreements in a row. Keen Ice.
Pretender. As much as I like the horse and great career, consistent performer, wouldn't be surprised if he gets a check, but not to win.
Okay, I'm with you on the Pretender to win. Contender to finish on the board. Last year, he was a distant third. He might get a little closer. I think maybe his form is even a little better this year. There is some speed in this Breeders' Cup Classic, so wouldn't surprise me if he got a check or if he rolled past Collected, my Pretender. But for the win, I agree. Pretender. Move to Hege, number 4 from the Baffert barn.
Oh, you movie fans, please don't get angry at me. He's a pretender in the Classic. It was wonderful to see him get a big win just a weekend or so ago, but he's not beating this bunch.
The Awesome Again winner, Matt, his first win since a big win in the UAE Derby years ago after grinding out all those seconds and thirds and fourths. He's a pretender in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That was a pretty weak Awesome Again, and I don't list him in my top 4 or 5 in the Classic. I don't see him winning. Maybe like Keen Ice, another horse who can get a check, but nothing more. Probably the least likely winner from the Baffert 4. Finally, one last Classic horse for you, Matt. I'm going to throw in my Travers bomb that ran second, Gunavera.
I think we're going to disagree on this one, Brian, unless I read my Zipsies wrong. Gunavera, Pretender. I love the horse. He ran a super big race in the Travers, but I don't like him shipping across the country to a new track. That's the only factor. He's the kind of horse that doesn't travel real well and needs everything going his way, but Pretender for me.
Gunavera is a pretender for me too, Matt, although I do think he's a must-use in the bottoms of the exotics. I think he's like Keen Ice. I think he's going to be passing horses for sure. I think he'll be quite a bit higher than Keen Ice. So he's my long shot to get into the picture. I don't see him winning. I will take slight issue with you on the fact that Guinevere has run good races at several different tracks, lots of pace in here, and he's a fresher horse than he was this spring. That seemed to help him this late this summer. And then again, he got a little break. I think Guinevere has a shot to run third, fourth, second, maybe. Should be 20-1. So Pretender, but interesting bomber. Now we're going to shift gears to the ladies. How about that? Why don't we go Distaff, Stellar Wind? Need I ask, Stellar Wind?
Contender.
Contender for me as well, Matt. The daughter of Curlin, lightly raced this year. She's had bad luck in the Breeders' Cup Distaff 2 years in a row. I think she's the best female dirt horse in America. I think she is clearly the one to beat in here. I like her. Contender with a bullet. Forever Unbridled to you, sir.
Contender. It's another one of these horses that's training up to the Breeders' Cup, but that's pretty standard, long layoffs before races for Forever Unbridled, which is something that concerns me about Stellar Wind.
Forever Unbridled has had one less race than the lightly raced 2017 campaign of Stellar Wind. I hate the fact that a healthy Forever Unbridled has only run twice this year. The Breeders' Cup Distaff will be her third race of the year. Charles Fipke, Dallas Stewart, come on, run your top horse more. Having said that, she's a contender for me. Last year she ran big. She's never run at Del Mar before, but if she can run a similar race to what she did last year, she will be right there, probably second or third, because I do like Stellar Wind, but a contender for sure. Matt, 3 Grade 1 wins for Abel Tasman, but in the Distaff, her first time against older mares. Is she a contender or a pretender?
Brian, she is a pretender for me. I really concerned after her performance in the Pennsylvania Derby, which was actually kind of similar to her performance at Saratoga. She is a horse who does not seem to be getting better. Maybe the long campaign is taking a toll, and with those kind of older horses in here, as good as Abel Tasman is, pretender.
I agree with you. Abel Tasman is a very good filly. I'm not as negative as some of the things that you mentioned there. I think that she's had her races pretty well spread out. The Cotillion certainly wasn't her best race of the year, but even her Grade 1 wins weren't overpowering wins. And yeah, she's moving up in class. Stellar Wind and Forever Unbridled are just better than anything she's faced before. So judging from every race she's run this year, she's never worse than second. It's just not quite good enough in this one. So I'm going to say pretender for Abel Tasman as well. How about the more up-and-coming 3-year-olds? First off, let's talk Elate, the winner of the Belding.
Brian, you know I'm going to make her a contender. I think that this is a horse that is getting better and better and better. And with her running style, she's going to be coming, and I think she's got a shot in the Distaff.
Contender, Matt. Agreed on everything you say. Elate is now the best 3-year-old filly in the country, at least at 9 furlongs. I think she's a contender in here. What about Paradise Woods? Remember how good Paradise Woods looked back in the Santa Anita Oaks? She came back in her second race with a nice win. Is she a contender in here?
Yeah, it was good to see her come back with that win recently, but not with this bunch. I'm making her a pretender.
She does have dangerous speed, and for that reason, I respect her, or I think she has maybe a little better chance than Abel Tasman in here. But as much as I like Stellar Wind and then Elate and Forever Unbridled, I'm going to have to go with you and call her a pretender as well, although I fear Paradise Woods just a little bit on her very best. One last Distaff for you, Matt. Champagne Room.
Yeah, that's a quick one. She's a pretender, even though she came back and won her race. It was against a pretty weak field, and her Juvenile fillies win last year, that was against a wide open field. This is a tough spot for her because we're talking about some superb older horses here.
Yeah, Champagne Room is a nice filly. She was my key to a winning Breeders' Cup last year, but a whole different ball of wax this year. Pretender. All right, Matt, we're going to go back with the males. We're going to go to the turf. Can Highland Real do it again, or is it too much to think he can win 2 in a row?
I don't think it's too much, and it'd be pretty risky to rule that horse out in any race, especially here in the States. Contender.
Contender for me as well. He is probably even a better horse in the States than anywhere else he's run. He's run well in multiple continents, but he likes American racing. He likes firm turf. Highland Real has a big shot to repeat. Contender. Beach Patrol is the hot, older turf male in America after wins in the Arlington Million and a really overpowering win in the Joe Hirsch. Contender, Pretender against the Euros coming in.
Well, I was surprised with that he produced that big win in the Joe Hirsch, so I'm going to make him a contender.
I don't see why not. He's got tactical speed. He might be stalking Highland Real early. He's obviously better than ever. And even when he was losing on that losing streak, he was always in contention. Mile and a Half seems to be right up his alley after watching the Joe Hirsch. Contender. What about the 3-year-old, Matt? Oscar Performance is a Breeders' Cup winner. He's run a lot of good races recently. Is he a contender?
No, I have to make him a pretender. The Joe Hirsch showed the difference between him running against the 3-year-olds and stepping up into older horses, and he's going to face a stronger field in the Breeders' Cup than he faced in New York.
All right, finally we have another disagreement, Matt, because I think Oscar Performance is in fact a contender in the Breeders' Cup turf. Few factors here. First off, he obviously liked the California turf last year. He shipped across and ran big in the juvenile turf last year. Remember, the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic was his first try, not only against Olders, but also against 12. He was second best in there, lost the head bob at the end after trying Beach Patrol. Certainly he wasn't as good as Beach Patrol that day, but I think improvements should be expected. He's still pretty lightly raced. Mile and a half under his belt now. Maybe they take Beach Patrol a little more seriously. I think he's got a shot to improve. Contender. There's one other contender for me, Matt, in this race right now. I'm sure I'll be afraid of some of the other Euros that come over. And that is with the 3 horses we mentioned, all liking to be on or near the lead. I have to look at Sadler's Joy, the late running Sadler's Joy mile and a half horse, as a contender in the Breeders' Cup turf.
Good solid horse, Sadler's Joy. Some nice wins, always right there at the end of the race. But I'm going to say Pretender. I just don't see him getting up for the win in the kind of field that's going to be there and whatever Euros end up coming over. But it's probably going to be running at the end and good shot for the trifecta.
Yeah, I think he's got a shot to pick up a whole bunch of pieces in there, Matt. Speaking of picking up the pieces, what about Lancaster Bomber going a mile, the Breeders' Cup mile, the 3-year-old? He was beaten by Oscar Performance in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but he ran big last year. Can he kind of turn the tables on world approval and run a big race in the mile?
Again, he's, I can say the same kind of thing. He's a kind of horse that runs a lot of good races, but you know what? In the kind of field that's going to be assembled for the mile, I don't see him getting the win. Doesn't mean he's not a good horse. Pretender.
Okay. What about Heart to Heart? Heart to Heart has run so many good races. He doesn't seem to get the respect that he deserves. He gave it up late at Keeneland this weekend, but surely he's a horse that you have to fear a little bit in the Breeders' Cup mile at Del Mar. I
have tons of respect for that horse, and boy, would I like to own a horse like that, because he's always right there, wins a lot, second most of the other time, but doesn't always get there. And same kind of things I was saying, I'm going to make him a pretender to win.
Okay, so I'm going to agree with you on Heart to Heart. I'm going to disagree, by the way, on Lancaster Bomber. I think he's an interesting long shot in the Breeders' Cup mile. Maybe not a long shot, but maybe 8-10 to 1. Heart to Heart, really nice horse. We both like him a lot, but he doesn't seem to beat the very best. So I'm going to go Pretender with him. And especially with a horse like World Approval bearing down on him on the turn, World Approval likes to be pretty close to the pace. World Approval for me is an obvious contender in the Breeders' Cup Mile.
Absolutely a contender. He has given the U.S. a major contender to win the mile.
Absolutely. And right now, the Europeans coming over, it looks like Ribchester might be the classiest one of the bunch. Ribchester, of course, we never know if he's going to run his very best a mile in California and Del Mar, but Ribchester is full of class, has a big closing kick. I have to make him a contender as well.
Yeah, Brian, you absolutely have to, but he's no Goldakova.
Don't look now, Matt, but the Breeders' Cup Sprint is a very interesting race. Drefang is the favorite. I'm not sure how low they'll make Drefang in here. I could see Drefang under 3-2, maybe even money-ish, but he's only run 2 races. Once he dumped Mike Smith early, and then the other one he went back to Saratoga and he won nicely. So he's literally won 1 race since last year's Breeders' Cup. Having said that, he's a contender, but at the odds, I feel like I want to take a shot to beat him.
I agree with that, Brian. He won't be a single in any of my multi-race wagers this year.
But he's a contender.
He is a contender for sure.
I thought so. How about Roy H? Roy H has kind of come out of nowhere this year, but he's very unlucky, frankly. The Bing Crosby, the trouble caused by Drefang, Roy H should have won that race. He'd be undefeated this year. You don't hear a lot about Roy H on a national level, but I think he's obviously a contender in the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
Yeah, and West Coast horse, home track advantage. I like his stalking running style in this sprint. That's probably going to have plenty of speed. Contender.
Not only is he a contender for me, Matt, right now he's the horse to beat. I guess he's the second choice, but you're right. If he can stalk and pounce, Roy H should be respected. Major contender. I also feel like with a lot of speed in here, Mind Your Biscuits is a horse I need to bet in here. Coming off a poor race at Saratoga in the Forego, but I think the closing kick of a feeling good Mind Your Biscuits is a big danger in this race. Another major contender for me.
And just last weekend, I was hanging out with his trainer, Chad Summers, a bit, and he said that he is back to doing much better than he was up at Saratoga. Chad, Mind Your Biscuits is a contender because of the pace that he will be able to run into here.
Another horse I think is kind of lost on a national scale, but is really good. I don't even know if a lot of our viewers have ever seen him run, but Imperial Hint has been burning up the track, and he's just a true 6 furlong horse, a real pro, never been better. Another contender for me in the sprint.
Winning all the big sprint races at Gulfstream, but hasn't tangled with the top level sprinters. I'm going to make him a pretender.
Ooh, I don't know, Matt. Imperial Hint might be a Roy H type, but they all want to be close, so it could set up for biscuits. Speaking of more quality speed, I'm not sure people realize how good Tackleful is yet. Tackleful, it wasn't a surprise for me to see him win the Vosburg. He was a very good second at Saratoga before that. I think Tackleful is a real deal kind of sprinter. And for the 5th straight time in the sprint, I'm calling him a contender.
He's a horse that has found his niche now as a sprinter. Very talented horse. Gonna be out front running. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a tough call. I'm going to make him a pretender just so I don't make everybody a contender.
Fair enough, Matt. There'll be other horses in there that we can make pretenders. Tackleful, at the very least, I think, makes the job of the favorite Drefang a whole lot tougher. Matt, I said the Breeders' Cup Sprint was an interesting looking field. How about the way the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile is coming together of late? I love the list of probables for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I'm just going to go through real quick here. My favorite right now is Pavel, the lightly raced son of Creative Cause for Doug O'Neill, coming out of the Jockey Club. I love the fact that he ran the entire stretch of the Jockey Club, never gave up despite his slightly raced nature, and now he's cutting back for a 2-turn mile at Del Mar. I'm a Pavel fan, and I say he's a contender in the dirt mile.
Well, and we know Doug O'Neill has had a lot of luck in the dirt mile. He won it with Golden Sense. I don't think I'm quite as excited about Pavel as you and some others are at this point, but he's definitely a contender.
Sharp as Tekka, Matt, when he runs his best, and he runs his best at 7 furlongs in a mile, he is a tough horse. Do you like him in here?
Well, this is a 2-turn mile, Brian, so I'm going to say Pretender.
I'm going to say Pretender, too, and it surprises me that we're both saying Pretender for Sharp as Tekka. I imagine he would be one of the horses that's bet in here. But, yeah, there's plenty of pace, and the 2 turns makes me off him just a little bit. He's a dangerous horse, but we're going to agree with the Pretender. Cupid, it looks like Cupid, after getting beaten the Awesome again, will drop down into a contentious dirt mile. And frankly, I think another contender in here. I think Cupid's got a nice running style. 2-turn mile should be right up his alley. Cupid is a contender for me in the dirt mile.
I found his performance in his last race very disappointing. I'm going to say Pretender.
Fair enough. Horses for courses, Matt. I'm going to tell you a horse that loves Del Mar, and his name, the John Sadler trainee, is Accelerator. For that reason, he's got some class, but for the reason of loving Del Mar, Accelerator for me is a contender.
And he's a contender for me also for those same reasons, Brian.
Now, the other Baffert on this list, More Spirit, looked like the best dirt miler possibly in the country the first half of the year, but we haven't seen him since. We were hopeful to get a prep in before the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. We're not going to get it. He's working well. I'm not sure what to think. I'm going to try to beat him. Maybe he's the favorite in here, despite the layoff. I'm going to say Pretender for More Spirit.
He has been training well, and that's encouraging. If he's at his best, he should win the race. That way, I will make him a contender.
I don't see him winning this race, man. I just don't see it. All right, good 3-year-olds. We haven't talked about some other good 3-year-olds. We mentioned Pavel, but what about Battle of Midway?
A very good 3-year-old, and I think the dirt mile is the perfect kind of race for him. But I'm going to make him a Pretender.
I thought he was your top pick a few weeks ago.
Well, Brian, we looking at the field a little bit more. I didn't love his last race. I'm making him a Pretender.
All right. I'll make him a contender because I did like his last race, and I agree with you. 2 turns, 1 mile, I think should be right up his alley. I think Battle of Midway is a very dangerous horse for Jerry Hollendorfer in here, as I do the other 3-year-old. I like 3-year-olds in here. The other one is Practical Joke. I think he needs a pace. If they run fast, which I think there's a good chance of happening, I think Practical Joke may be one of the ones to beat. 2 turns. I know he hasn't won at 2 turns this year, but 2 turns, 1 mile with pace, that should be fine for him. So I like Practical Joke as a contender.
I agree with you, Brian. Let's remember he almost won the Haskell going 2 turns at 1 1/8. Contender.
All right, Matt, I feel silly asking about the next one. We're gonna go to the Filly and Mare Turf, and the first horse on our list is Lady Eli. Matt, is Lady Eli a contender in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf?
Let me see. Lady Eli on the turf, firm, hard going, contender.
9 furlongs, firm turf. I like her to win. Contender. Among the Euros, Rhododendron might be one of the classiest ones.
Yep, and again, have to respect the horse. Contender.
She's a contender, but I like Lady Eli quite a bit more. This is a big spot for the Americans, I think, the Filly and Mare Turf this year, as opposed to many years where the Euros seem to have the big advantage. All right, some other recent winners. I could go through them fast here. Quidura, Zapesa, Avenge, and Warflag have all won graded stakes recently. I'll tell you what, I don't love any of them. I think all are nice, four nice Filly and Mares on the turf here. I don't see Warflag doing it. Avenge and Zipasa both ran well last year, but again, that's as best that they can do this year. Maybe get a third or something. But Quidura for me is the interesting one. Remember, she gave Lady Eli all she wanted at Saratoga. She looked great up at Woodbine. I think Quidura might be my second choice in here. So Quidura for me is the contender of that list.
Yeah, I think I agree. The Quidura has, and even when she hasn't won, she's run really good races. Graham Motion Training seems to have that horse ready. I would make her a contender and the other three pretenders.
All right, we're agreement on that. How about we go short with the Turf Sprint? Ohm won last year. It surprised, I think, both of us a little bit. Can Ohm do it again?
It did surprise both of us in there. This is a little bit of a tougher field, Brian Zipsy, than last year. And just because we'll get to a couple others, I'm going to make Ohm a pretender in here.
Ohm is a pretender in here, Matt. 5 furlongs, I think, makes a difference as well. He's had kind of a spotty year, so I'm against the defending champion in this race, as I am the old pro Hoagie. Hoagie looked good winning at Kentucky Downs, but I think out at Del Mar 5 furlongs, it'll be tough for him. So he's a pretender on my list.
I agree with that.
The horses that aren't pretenders at this point begins with Lady Aurelia. I don't know that there's a better 5 furlong horse in the world than Lady Aurelia. She gets her 5 furlongs this year in the Turf Sprint. She's the one to beat. So she's obviously a contender.
She certainly is. But Brian, does it matter that it's going to be going around a turn and not just the straightaway?
No, I don't think so. She's proven to handle a turn just as well as a straightaway for my money anyway. She's just really, really good at 5 furlongs. Disco Partner, on the other hand, 5 furlongs is a little bit more of a question mark for him. He's done well at 6, especially 6, 7 as well. But I think his form is so good right now. The Christophe Clement Gray, I think Disco Partner, if he can run like he has been at Belmont, 5 furlongs, he should be running late at Del Mar, so he's a contender for me.
Well, yeah, I think you have to make him a contender. He's super fast. Last 2 6 furlong victories have been in 106 and change. That's fast, Brian. I don't care who you're running against. That's fast.
Yeah, he'll only need to run about 10 seconds faster for one less furlong, 56 or so for this one. Yeah, Disco Partner's an interesting contender to take on the speed that is Lady Aurelia. Let's stick with the sprinters, Matt. We're going to go filly and mare sprint. We saw the return of Unique Bella yesterday. She looked like a monster against little girls running in the LA Woman. She probably wasn't fully cranked and probably wasn't asked fully. Obviously, for me, a contender. I think there's a great distance for her in the filly and mare sprint.
I agree. The 7 furlong distance just makes things even better for Unique Bella, although she looked a little rank and a little uncomfortable at some points of her comeback race, but she's definitely the horse to beat.
What about Sky Diamonds, Matt? She's made quite a bit of noise in California this year. Is she one of the top contenders?
Yeah, I would absolutely make her a contender in this field that is not an easy field by any means, Brian, when Unique Bella is going to be another one of those overwhelming favorites.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I think Unique Bella is a horse that at 3 to 5, 4 to 5 in here, there's a chance she gets beat, and there's several good ones. Sky Diamonds is one of them for me. She's a contender. By the Moon, I'm going to say no. By the Moon is a pretender, although 7 furlongs a mile, she's proven an awfully nice mare over the years for Samantha Siegel, but 7 furlongs at Del Mar, I'm not convinced of her. But the other New York, the other horse from the East Coast, Paula Silver Lining, I like a little bit better. They've been knocking heads a little bit. Which of those two do you like, Matt?
Yeah, I like Paula Silver Lining better than By the Moon. So I'll agree with you on that. By the Moon, pretender. Paula, contender.
Very good. Last year's defending champion, Finest City. Can we forget about her?
I'm going to say pretender. I don't think she's up to snuff. Although, last year her victory in the Breeders' Cup kind of came out of the blue. So who knows? I guess maybe she could do it again, but Pretender for me.
She's a contender for me. Out in California and at a distance, I think she loves. 7 Furlongs is a little bit unique. No pun intended for Unique Bella, but I think Finest City at 7 Furlongs is going to be a threat out there. Finley's Lucky Charm is a very, very talented Kentucky filly. I don't think she gets enough credit for the talent she has. I wonder if she's better at 6 than 7, but with her speed and her talent, I'm going to throw her in as one more contender in the filly and mare sprint.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna make her a Pretender just because we're shipping out to California and running at Del Mar.
Okay, Matt, we haven't talked about the 2-year-olds at all. Let's start with the Kentucky Derby horses of 2018. Bolt Doro, the son of Medaglia Doro for Ruiz Racing, has just looked so good both at Del Mar and Santa Anita. He is my contender for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
I think he's going to be a favorite and a very legitimate one. Contender.
Free Drop Billy, obviously the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland was tragic because of what happened to 10 City. But Free Drop Billy looked good in winning. Is Free Drop Billy a contender?
I think he's a contender. He's going to come running at the end, just like he has in all of his starts. Dale Roman's training. Contender.
I'm going to say Pretender, and that's because of how much I like Bolt Doro in here, the favorite. I think this is the most likely winner of the entire Breeders' Cup card, so it's going to be hard for me to find many other contenders in here. And Free Drop Billy, it hasn't proven to me that he's a really nice horse. I think he will move forward on the Triple Crown Trail. I might like him better in the Derby than I do in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but I think at best he rallies for a piece. I don't see him beating Bolt Doro. Nor do I see Firenze Fire, who's won 2 graded stakes in New York, beating Bolt Doro going a mile 16th at Del Mar. He's a Pretender for me as well.
Yep, I agree. Pretender. Everything we said about Bolt Doro, his talent, and what he's shown, and the home track advantage with the juveniles being on there on the track that they've run on is a bigger advantage for the juveniles than it is for the older horses, because these youngsters that are so lightly raced just don't have the experience shipping across the country to all kinds of different tracks. So Pretender there.
I'm going to throw out a few more. The Tabulator, undefeated, came out of nowhere to win at Churchill recently. For me, he's just not quite good enough. Pretender. Montauk, on the other hand, I think could be good enough, but he's only had 1 career race. We don't know for sure if they're going to run him, but I have a feeling that they might. And Montauk, to me, might be the most interesting horse after Bolt Doro, so he would be my only other contender right now for the Juvenile.
I can agree with that. I was there and saw Montauk's race, and Brian's talking about a horse that debuted at Belmont this weekend for Todd Pletcher and owner Robert LaPenta in Eclipse Thoroughbreds. Well-bred. He went 7 furlongs in 121 and change. Very, very dangerous and talented horse that was a big purchase price as a yearling.
Having said that, Matt, it's tough to win a race like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile off of 1 career start, but Montauk certainly looks like the real deal. How about the Juvenile fillies, Matt? While we have Bolt Doro, I said he was the most likely winner maybe of any race. I'm not sure about the fillies. Moonshine Memories looks to be the favorite off of her undefeated record out in California. She's a contender for me, but I think she's beatable.
Yeah, definitely a contender. And the home track advantage that I talked about just before, she's definitely a contender. And but again, she is not a standout like Bolt Doro.
Agreed. Separation of Powers. I loved her debut performance, and then she kind of got cooked a little bit at Saratoga, but she bounced back nicely in the Frizette. Wasn't particularly fast, but she did it in a nice way with a little bit of rating ability. I'm going to keep her because I think she has potential as a contender.
Yeah, I agree. It's Chad Brown, and he has had tremendous success in the Breeders' Cup the last few years.
Heavenly Love is an interesting case. Mark Cassie's Malibu Moon filly. She won her second race out for fun a turf sprint at Kentucky Downs, and then she took that, parlayed that into a big win in the Alcibiades, going a mile 16th at Keeneland, which she won easily as well. I'm not sure what she's beating in either race. I'm hesitant to love Heavenly Love, but off of those two performances in this race where I don't love anyone, she's a contender for me.
Yeah, and like you said, Brian, she's already won on the grass and on the dirt, so she can win on different kinds of tracks. So maybe the move out to the Del Mar track is something that won't bother her. Hard to throw her out. I guess I'll make her a contender also.
This is a race where I really don't love anyone, Matt. As I mentioned, I'm smelling an upset. We've seen some big prices in the juvenile fillies of recent years. I don't know who that may be yet. I have to see how it all shakes out. But I think this might be a race to catch another bomb.
Sounds like a reasonable plan, Brian.
All right, folks. That was our Breeders' Cup show for Contenders and Pretenders. Remember, we're only 3.5 weeks out now. We can't wait for the Breeders' Cup, the first one ever at Del Mar. Matt and I will be here every week leading up to and after the Breeders' Cup to give you all the info you need as you get ready for the Breeders' Cup. Can I get a parting shot from you, sir?
I just want to thank our Horse Center fans for being patient and giving us a little breather to get ready for the Breeders' Cup. And as always, it's great to see our producer, Brett Workman. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for Alexis Workman, the co-producer today. Well done to both of them. And thank you, folks, for watching. We'll be back next week with another edition of Horse Center.